mostrarlo.
So, okay, thank you, everybody. We decided to modify slightly the agenda. We were supposed to have working group now, and then to have a plenary session. Since yesterday, working group addressed the issues in a very general way, we thought that maybe it can be more fruitful also because we are all tired to have now the report from the working group outcoming and then start directly the general discussion in order to draft some conclusion from this meeting. And then I would like also to remember you that if you are still around and if you appreciate, there is an aperitif 7 p.m. just served where we have lunch and coffee break. So yesterday the working group were organized and some guidelines have been provided in order to drive the discussions. And so 3 main questions, and here I'm going to show you what are the answers. Even since we are scientists, we never provide answers. Of the NEMO working group, about the first question that was provide examples of existing operational services which may be taken as best practices within the operational oceanography field or other domains. So we immediately started complaining that the question is not well addressed because it strongly depends on the scales that we are considering, the temporal and spatial scale, that must be identified to answer this question. And then clearly, again, in a kind of brainstorming meeting, before to provide an example of what we think was the best example of the operational system, we discussed a little bit on the difference between private and public sector services. And so it had been discussed that probably in the academic environment, the word or the discipline of operational oceanography is not so appealing because it's something that is related to practical application, while in that environment is more pure research. And on the other hand, in the private company are somehow skeptic about the application services that are developed or provided by the scientists. Because again, since the scientist or the academy doesn't have really commitments, most of the time they can argue about the quality and the accuracy provided by these application and services. So there is still a cultural gap between the two environments that probably must be addressed, and in the future we should try to better communicate. And also has been discussed the time frame, so the temporal constraints in the two environments are very different, because in the academy we or you are usually more free, and there are not, the calendar is not so defined as in the private company that most of the time they need immediate answer. After the discussion, we agreed that there were a general consensus that probably the operational services that has been shown by Professor Bloomberg, Stodd and Stevens University Operational Service, is probably the best example. Both in terms of the complexity, so the combination of the observational network, the modeling effort, and the dissemination, the end user, but especially for the approach. So we think that the example that we should take from this exercise is the approach. So as we well understood, there are the end users, private and public companies that are the end user that are supporting the university in order to develop the system and then provide again information to the private and public sector. So it's a self-sustaining system, and we think that that was the most important aspect that they should be considered in that sense, in addition to the all the science that there is inside, but also this virtual loop must be considered. Sorry, I forgot to say before, but if the other participants to the working group think that I'm not reporting in the right way or I'm forgetting something, interrupt me whenever you think is necessary. Yeah. Then the second question was, again, too much science. Identify two gaps. You can see already there that we didn't identify just two gaps or challenges that would need to be addressed in the future. And here there are the bullets or all the issues or gaps or challenges that we have identified. So for sure, there is the work that must be done on the dissemination side. So improve the graphical output in the dissemination tool. We should also work and to find a way to provide information and advice on how to use the data or what are the uncertainties that are related to the data. From a scientific point of view, there are a lot of research addressed to in this issue, but it's still not so clear, and especially when we have to go to the end users that are not scientists, the way we provide this information is very important. So dissemination is one of the challenging. The second, we discussed a bit about the technical instrument or the scientific tool. So from continuous to discrete space, and there are some geometrical constraints that are still poorly addressed in the models or even in the observations, like straits and channels. And a good example is the Turkish Straits system, where two very important basins like the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea are connected through a very complex environment. So those must be better modeled and observed. And we discussed about the possibility to change the instruments, so from finite difference to finite element. And there are pros and cons in both the case. So the finite difference are probably much easier to understand and encode clearly. So for the scientists, while the finite element are more complicated, but then on the other hand, they provide a lot of flexibility in terms of geometrical definition of the area. And up to now, what is true is that still finite difference, they do have better performance. That in the operational application is very important because the information must arrive in the due time. And connected to this last issue, there is the next bullet, which is the model performance, or EPC. And the discussion was in that sense that until a few years ago, the hardware, we have a specific hardware for research, for science, while now the hardware is more, the evolution of the hardware is more driven by other business, not by research. And so we should adapt our codes, model software or other codes, in order to better fit this new environment, this new hardware, and they should be developed simultaneously. So we should adapt the present code to available computer architectures, and also we should try to combine the physics and the math in order to better follow the computer development. Maybe the code became more complicated, but the performance is an issue that we think should be addressed. Then the next bullet is concern the physics. We all agree that there is still the need from some basic physics research. For example, the vertical physics for accounting wave effect, and especially in the framework of this conference, where a lot of effort and attention is paid to the coastal area. In the coastal area, without accounting for some physical processes, I mean, the information we can provide will never be accurate, even if we reach amazing resolution. And for example, the effect on the waves in the setup of the sea level or in the current along the coast, it's still something that in most of the model is missing, or also internal waves and all the parameterization that are like the bottom friction that are now in the model must be improved for sure. And there is also a multi-scale, multidisciplinary process that must they need still investigation. And then we also distinguish it between the physical process that we know that are occurring, and also we know what are the physical law explaining these processes, but are not implemented because the computer power is not enough, and some other physical processes that still need investigation. So there is something that we can do if we combine with the previous points. So if we improve the performance of our code. We are already ready to implement some additional physics that we know, but up to now it's not possible for limits in the computer power. But however, there will be also an additional physics that still needs research. The next bullet concerns the data simulation in the ocean. The discussion, if I well remember, yes, is a kind of legacy in data simulation we obtained from the atmospheric field. So the tool, the mathematical and statistical tool we are using are exactly the same that are used in the atmospheric field, but actually the number of observations is very different. And so we are not sure that these tools are adequate for our field because there are several order of magnitude of difference between the number of data that are assimilated operationally in weather forecasting services and in the ocean forecasting services. So probably there is still some basic research to improve the efficiency of our simulation scheme. And then the last bullet, but not least, is the backup. We should also ensure the continuity of the system and in order to provide continuously the information and the availability and clearly the reliability. Yeah. Then the last questions that we are trying to address, as you can see, sometimes we didn't work the line, how to say. So it identified two solution project or approach to solve the identified challenging. And here there are some suggestions, but not solution. Improve the communication seems to be a very important issue that we should obtain the public interest, like for the weather forecast. So we should be able to communicate, and obtaining the public interest, it would be a big improvement for us, because then there are the possibility that we are sustained. Exchange knowledge in sense of supporting projects that involve different countries, different PhD students, intercontinental collaboration that up to now are very difficult. That can be a good solution, because to exchange knowledge between USA, Europe, Africa, and Asia, that can be an important step. I didn't find the way to translate in a better word. I'm sorry for that. Funding agency support. So the idea was that I'm going to be not very elegant now, but sometimes the support is provided to the institution, to the people that is making research, more than the research itself. So we should change this funding scheme, and we should find a good way to encourage good research. For example, prizes could make the scientific career more appealing, or also a project that could receive a prize. So there is these funding schemes that must be reviewed. We should invest on computer science, and that is a solution to a bullet in the previous slides. And then we should invest in order to fill the observational gap. And there are three about this issue. First, we should encourage and increase the operational use of already existing platform on technologies, like we have seen today, HF radar or gliders or autonomous vehicle. They do exist from several years, but especially in Europe they are not so diffuse, and we should work in this direction. We clearly need to invest in new instrumentation, because we are addressing some areas that are not well sampled from an instrumentation point of view. And then another, I think that the last idea was that we should encourage the collaboration with the private sector, because clearly sharing the data can be good, but also taking the opportunity and of the facilities, because most of the time private sector, they have money to deploy instrument and to create infrastructure in the sea, and probably the research sector or some other institutional sector can take benefit of this effort of reducing the cost. For example, saving the cost of the ship, saving the cost of some platform, but just adding additional instrumentation in the already existing platform that are deployed by the private company. I think that for our working group was more or less what we discussed. Yes. So if there are participants from that working group that think I'm not reporting in the right way, or we are all too tired, or I had done a fantastic job. Yeah.
Sorry to take your time. I am not a participant because I arrived today, but I have an issue. I see two themes in the working group. Situational awareness and ship routing. In my opinion, my view, this is a two themes not very overlapping or fusing, because ship routing, the main interest or usefulness of work in ship routing is with an aim to an economic benefit for companies. The main stakeholder is in that direction. So it's a sector where private company can play an important role. And in my view, could be left to the private sector. Situational awareness is much more about safety. In safety, a role for public sector must be foreseen. Public sector is not only academic world. There are the world of services. There are a system behind safety that needs infrastructure, needs communication system, and need decision maker in order to, in case of event that need some strong decision also at the political level. This sector is somewhat already ruled by an international convention that is safety of life at sea. There is a global system aimed at support people at sea, so ship, vessel, and so on. I see a dissemination system aimed at it that is mainly based on NAVTEC system, single frequency, radio frequency, where ship can collect information about the situation, and Inmarsat satellite distribution. There are also duty at the national level who put information in that system. So this should be taken on the background and what in the discussion and what is asked to academy, what can be improved in that system. This is my view.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Yeah, I have to say that I totally agree with you. In fact, at least in our group, actually our brainstorming, our discussion was driven more by the meaning of this conference than the title that is written there. I think that we never mentioned in our discussion situational awareness or ship routing. We were thinking to provide information. So what we can do in order to improve the information we provide and improve the quality of a decision support system in general. I agree that, and we never thought about that, but you are right, that you are quite two different disciplines. because we go from business to safety, and safety is fortunately well ruled, and there are corridor, how to say, where we should move, and we cannot. I mean, yeah, I agree. So we can discuss on the fly, or if you want, Giovanni has to left. I hope he was back. Do you want to? Yeah. So we can give to the report of the next group.
Okay, so thank you. I will report on behalf of our working group. Thank you to all the participants for the very fruitful discussion. So also in our case, of course, we had the guidelines of the 3 questions, but as you noticed during these days, all the thematics are deeply connected, so it's impossible to talk about sea awareness and not mentioning also at the same time all the search and rescue or oil spill problems. So about the first question, examples of existing operational services which can be considered as the best practices, we discussed about applications that focus a proper transformation of data and forecast for the user benefits. For example, we noticed that sea condition in this way, of course the sea condition is not the perfect product absolutely, but it has interesting features, like for example a way that the possibility to display the marine forecast divided in a certain time window that probably are very useful for us, because of course we are not interested in an average of the conditions of the sea in a day, but maybe we are interested more in a particular time window. Of course, we appreciated, and we appreciated the New York storm surge forecasting system, particularly because we noticed that the color code, green, the event, the location is, let's say, safe. Red, there's a condition of alarm. Is very effective in transferring this information to the public, people and users. And people that are not very familiar with the scientific way of displaying data are, on the contrary, very, very happy to see the color code. Indeed, this is a simplified approach, but nevertheless very, very effective. And we also discussed, and we saw that similar applications are also provided for the Venice storm surge forecasting system. So also for Venice, we have a similar approach that maybe we can take as an example of best practice. Another good example of a simple way of presenting the result is what is today in the weather forecasting application for mobile systems. So users are very familiar with this way of presenting. So I think trying to copy, let's say, this approach in marine forecast systems can be useful, and especially for the public. We also discussed, and thanks to one of the participants, we also became aware of there is this other ocean forecasting system, ARSO, and this is also a good example of meteo-ocean forecasting. And Mongoose and EmotNet are good examples of cooperation and data sharing. It's a pity that we didn't have a talk about EUCISE today, but this is a project that will allow in the future even further collaboration between European member states about data sharing of information. So, about question 2. the possible gaps and challenges. Of course, the climatology of meteo ocean info for route planning and transport of, for example, by larger ship and operational activities and setting of platform can be very, very interesting to have, because of course people want to plan if it's better to sit a platform in October more than June or the contrary. Moreover, short-term forecasts for operational platform-related activities are also very important. That is to say, to have a high resolution in time and space for a particular moment. Other gaps are the alert systems for weather conditions in the ocean and the possibility to have them customized for different vessels, and in order to get the best available ocean forecast, and also on mobile applications. So people can consult the forecast in every possible condition and have them almost available in real time. Another gap is to have a local forecast for sudden storms at a local scale, for example, tramontana events in summer season in Slovenia. Probably it must be improved, the observing system. Today we have many satellites and many possibility of monitoring the sea state, but of course it's always worth to improve them. And again, a gap is the cooperation for data sharing. Moreover, still about the gaps, it's important to have a high-resolution time and space analysis for design of platforms and pipe, and to plan the operational at sea. Also very important is the uncertainty estimation of ocean forecasts or ensemble forecasting products and climatology in all the areas. South Adriatic, Montenegro, and Albania, and in North Africa, as thanks to one of the participants, it was also noticed that there's a need of a better observatory system for coastal observation and data sharing. Also, of course, better prediction systems for search and rescues, and it was emerged also that maybe can be very important to implement two-way communications from ship that could inform the other ships nearby of sudden conditions of dangers or other sea conditions that couldn't be foreseen by the ocean forecastings. And in this context, the VTS is normally working, but it should be connected to state-of-the-art meteo ocean forecasting systems. Today, I think it takes into account only meteo conditions. Also, the ship routing could be used also to suggest the best route to get in the harbor. To get at the harbor at the best time. For example, if we know that Venice is going to be closed because of the icy level at a certain time, of course it's worth for the ship to arrive before, and maybe video and movie for a more effective alerting system. For the question 3, so identify two solutions and projects or approaches to solve the identified challenges. It's important to develop a reanalysis and short-term forecasting systems and alert systems for offshore operations and transport. Multimodal forecast and more in general ensemble forecastings that are going to provide the worst and mean scenario for conservative approach. Then it's important to provide the extreme events analysis and probability distribution so that every user can customize its own probability or its own thresholds for operation. So develop a reanalysis with uncertainty estimation, and glider and radar should be included in the observation that we are taking into account. implement a multimodal approach in search and rescue DSS, develop a mobile application for using with Met Ocean forecast and services, produce video and movie for alerting, develop local forecasting systems at a very high resolution, and try to convince countries that it's better to have a data sharing system more than to keep information reserved. Also, develop cost-effective and easily deployable coastal observatory in all the major Mediterranean region, and common projects with VTS and Mid-Ocean integrated systems, and will continue to further develop ship routing and a new and better and more effective way for alerting. So thank you very much. Do you have questions? Comments? Yes?
A suggestion on my side from due to the economic situation, due to now also the situation of the infrastructure at sea that are mainly financed through funding coming from the research. A big issue is how to make this investment of the country structural. So I think you need to make a strong lobby action toward authority to make the observatory at sea infrastructure dedicated to observation at sea more resilient and reliable in the future. This is
follow-up. I think it's a very important comment. Last week we had the Eurogoose meeting, that is the European Association of Operational Oceanography. And most of us were stressing first of all, the relationship with Met offices. And we mentioned the agreement that Mongoose has with EOMETNet in order to, let's say, even if it's a small domain of the overall observing system, but to optimize and being cost effective in ship of opportunity measurements. The other point that we stress is that we should try to develop the concept of coastal observatories or observatories, but that often has a sub-regional dimension, like the Adriatic Sea or Ionian Sea. So we call it coastal, meaning that they have also a geographical, of course you can then group at the Mediterranean level, but often they are concentrated also to be cost effective in some special region. And we would like to lobby in that sense and also propose an ESFRI that will be a structural investment from Europe for supporting this. And of course ESFRI is also good because it involves the national commitment, like the nations has done for ENSO. So, I mean, I think we should continue and lobby on that.
We look at the in situ, like, let's say, in situ observation, but also you need to support satellite program because we had the JSON 2 at risk, and the satellite program are very costly. So if it's not a strong issue toward the government to support such program, and also this program in the future could be at risk.
Other comments? No? Abbiamo detto? Okay. So we follow up. Giuseppe.
So I will be different from the previous one because I really be very short. And I condensed our discussions in very few points. Just 2 comments for introduction. First of all, I would like to ask all the participants to add any details I'm missing in the slides. And the second is that we had discussions among different stakeholders from different points of view, researchers, practitioners, the company side. And I think that during the discussion it came. I mean, our aim was somehow to put in the place of the users. So we really had this user's perspective in commenting all these aspects. Regarding the first question. Another general issue I would like to underline is that we didn't actually focus on specific aspects like ship routing or search and rescue. We just had a very general discussion on operational oceanography. There was a starting statement, starting observations on the fact, also considering the presentations during yesterday, that there is some kind of parallel streams. There is the official institutional one, mainly funded by national or overnational, like EU institutions, and that provides very reliable, very scientifically sound data and up-to-date results. But with the drawback that these very well established results may not be readable used by users, which it should be also intended to. And as a parallel approach is the other one that we have seen in some examples of yesterday, like sea conditions of Visir, where it is exactly the opposite, starting from the user needs and develop tools that may reply to these needs. So anticipating what will come next is that, of course, there is a gap that needs to be somehow bridged between these 2 parallel approaches in order to make them a unique one. And the other observations in terms of good practices, some example is that of course, there are many examples. The examples depend also on the purposes for which data or information are produced. So we did not actually list some of them, but you have seen today and yesterday some of them. In terms of the gaps, starting also from the considerations I just mentioned before, there is a need to develop the knowledge and information for specific applications. That's somehow is this closing the 2 parallel lines into one. So looking at the needs of the users, of the different users that may need different information, different data, and develop knowledge according to this, knowledge and tools, of course, and products. And then in terms of gap, there is this general recognition, especially from a private company side, that what the companies know and use is not necessarily what is the most developed and the most updated information, data, and tools that are produced by mainly the scientific community. There was also the consideration of the fact that the users may use the same channels of knowledge, and they rely on these specific ones. And there was also the concern about the fact that it should be somehow a generalized approach, and also the kind of mission to develop the concepts that not all the information that is produced can be used, and that the different products may respond to different needs of the users. And these were more general, let's say, identified gaps. In terms of specific scientific gap, there was this identification of high-resolution models, especially for the coastal areas. And, validation issues were mentioned also as another element to be further addressed. In terms of solutions, the first one is to involve the users in the collection of data, which has two benefits. First, because the users then they will also know more about the tools and information produced, and also because the producers, the scientific community may have more opportunities to have data and to have new statistics also for validation purposes. There was an example of the ship opportunities. So use somehow the users in order to get more data. Then another way to fill the gaps between the users and the developers was to create more occasions of this physical meeting like what we are having now, in order to physically put the people together and make them know that there are products and that there are developments going on, that there are researches going on, developing tools according to their needs. To support the dialogue, to identify users' needs, also to avoid duplication. So it's not only in a one-way or two-way dialogue between developers and users, but also among the same developers, in order to not to duplicate efforts in developing tools or models or information or data that are already available. And then a third issue is about a common platform, so really a place where these already available data and models may be stored and may be offered to the users, and offered in a structured way, meaning that starting from the recognition I just mentioned before about the fact that not all the information is usable and needed to all the users indifferently. What we can do is to provide information according to the levels of details that the users may need, or to the levels of information they actually need for their purposes. And a fourth element is enforcing a cycling process. So starting from the users, producing, but going back and having this feedback, which is the most important element in order to see whether the products and the data produced are actually of use for the people and the users that were taught from the beginning. And it's important to establish a process and a framework that puts the different actors of the process together, which was underlined is somehow missing, for example, in Italy, but maybe in place in other countries or in other situations. And I think that's all. I don't know if the participants wants to add anything I missed. Okay, and if anybody else has any comment?
Yeah, just a brief comment about the EU Copernicus services. That service is not intended to reach the end users. So the target of that service are what we define the intermediate users. So there must be is thought in that way. So it must be an additional effort then to elaborate the data, further combine with other data, new model, to reach the end user. So up to now, that's the base. Without that one, but is exactly. Yeah, because in the first you mentioned that the Copernicus that doesn't reach the end user, and then VC and another, and it's the combination of the two that then make the cover the entire stream. Just this comment. Yeah.
So essentially, I wrote the names of the people participating to the meeting, so if they want to intervene, they can intervene at any time. Essentially, this is Nigel. So, and essentially, we started from your last slide. Essentially, one of the major questions you posed, how to involve the users. And we started from, in order to define what are the best practices in operational services, we started from user needs. So essentially, the problem, why essentially we need to have an operational system. We need to have an operational system in order to respond to society needs. And at the same time, responding to society needs, we also implement science and technology. So from our point, what was discussed is the best example is, of course, a weather forecast. During the meeting, there were many examples of good collaboration between marine operational systems and some specialized stakeholders. But thinking to the society, and thinking also, for example, to the wider maritime sector, that is not only to specialized stakeholders, but to a wider community. We think that essentially we are not at the same level of the weather forecast. So essentially, we need to improve our links with the maritime sector. This is essentially the meaning. And so essentially collaboration among society, science, technology is still not appropriate in operational oceanography. So this is essentially, we have science and technology. Science is, science needs technology, and technology is built on science. But at the same time, science and technology should serve people, and what is necessary to do is essentially to link science and with the users. And this was a little bit discussed yesterday about the problems related to ocean literacy. Okay, so gaps. Essentially, international collaboration, this was mentioned before. International collaboration is very important. At the same time, we have to say that the capabilities and capacities are different from country to country, and from region to region and inside the sub-regions. So essentially, we need to also increase the collaboration between the different countries in order to have a equal level in terms of skills, scientific and technological knowledge, and so on. So the gaps are in data availability, and it was mentioned also during the previous presentation. But as I said before, we need also to improve the skills also not only in regions, in countries where these skills are not need to be improved, and we need essentially this link between science, policy, and collaboration between research and small enterprises. So just to underline some points about science and policy collaboration between research and small enterprises. So this is a different view of the GMES butterfly. So essentially we have an operational system is based by on many components. There is the observing system, the numerical models, data simulation, and then we have some core products and the core services and downstream services. It was discussed in an Agile working group that essentially there is a need to have to improve our knowledge also in terms of the physics contained in the models. At the same time, what is important is in the distinction between core services and downstream services is that essentially there are different scales that are approached in core services with respect to downstream services. So what is important is, in any case, the core services are very important because we cannot develop downstream services if there is not a long-term provision of data and products from the core services. This means that essentially, and this was discussed before, that essentially in order to maintain the core services, we need that the policymakers understand the importance of the core services in order to develop downstream services, where there is a big role for small, medium enterprises that who can implement customized services for the many end users that are existing. At the same time, there is a need to improve the observing system. So the small enterprises have an important role in the development of the observing system, but it should be at the same time multidisciplinary and multi-platform. And the technological implementation has to be done, has to be driven by science. And finally, it was presented during previous presentation that there is a need essentially to have an improvement of knowledge in the physics contained in the models, but it was underlined in the working group that there is a need also to improve scientific and technological research also in the downstream services. So not only core services need to be improved, but also the downstream services at a scientific level. And okay, so what are starting from the problems we are looking for solutions. Essentially, there are many components in an operational system, but all these components have to work together in a collaborative way and in an efficient way. This means that essentially there is a need to have what is normally called a service level agreement between the different components. And this essentially service agreement will regulate the duties and define constraints in the operational systems. And it was discussed a lot about quality of data and the products. And in any case, it is important to assure the quality of data and the products that are delivered to intermediate users from core services and to end users from downstream services. So this is essentially something that is important, and in any case, the feedback with the users is important since it can improve the quality of the data and products in itself. And in any case, we have different users that we have to approach, and there could be different agreement levels, and in any case, the development, continuous development of customized products. And okay, this is my presentation. Many things that we discussed in the working group were also presented by the other working groups. So I think I can leave the floor to the colleagues who participated to the working groups, and if they want to add something. Nobody of the working groups want to add something? That's all from my side.
So I think that we are approaching the end of the meeting. What I have seen from this report from the working group, that there are a lot of similarities. So probably we spent too much time together in the past years. So now we all think in the same way. That can be a problem to really improve. Or could be that statistically it's the right way to approach the problem. Yes, I think that if we want now and if you think that there are points that you want to discuss, comment, or something that has been missed or not accounted, not taken by the working group, that's a good moment to do that. Otherwise, we are all tired, and as I told you before, at 7 p.m. there is aperitif served where we have the coffee, and then can be a good moment after some relax to continue and further discuss about these issues, or totally change, because World Cup is approaching, so we also have other important issues to discuss between each other. So if there are no comments, I don't know if somebody want to... Okay, I see we are tired. Okay, Alan, there, thank you.
I would like us to all start to think about the future and not to emphasize data so much. When you care about the atmosphere, you go to a website and you get a map of what's happening. You don't get data at every particular spot. So what we really need to do is to figure out how you blend data and a field to make a realization that the user will use. I don't know any real user who wants time series of the data, except scientists. So we should start figuring into the future how to blend these two together, how to make the field better. Now, fields come from models, but they also could come from blending data together and then hook that into a model. So our future should be like the weather service, much more than an infant field of oceanography.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. And I think, yes, that was also part of somehow our discussion on the data simulation. Because it's different from what occurs in the weather system, that the best estimate of the weather condition is the analysis. That's a well-established concept in the weather environment, while for the ocean is still not so well established the concept. So most of the time we prefer to give a look to the data, to the observed data as a time series or whatever it is, instead of the coherent model field which is provided. And probably there is a work that must be done there in order to improve our simulation scheme and to be more confident, and also to convince also the end users that that picture is the best information that we can have about the ocean state. I agree. Yeah.
Well, the point of data is, of course, to be used in the data user perspective, and also for the validation, because the users this time most of them want to know how good is the forecast compared to the observation, or at least how good is the forecast. Then we usually answer with a comparison with the observation. But I think that at least myself, when I think about what I was calling coastal observatories, it is not only data. I mean, it's data plus the model in a forecasting system mode, basically to understand how it was in the past, blending, and to get the best forecast, and also to assess the uncertainties of this forecast. So to provide, yesterday people were saying the currents will go that direction with a certain probability, and we are not that close. I mean, at least in Italy, to have an operational system that say currents and wave are like that, and this is the probability or the uncertainty associated with that. So it's I agree that anyhow is only the combination of data and model and satellite, I mean data in situ and satellite, that can give you the best product.
About this problem of data, essentially, we're discussing here mainly the physical process and the physical data, but in any case, just going back, why we need an operational system. We need the operational system, especially for coastal areas. where there are the applications, essentially. And in coastal areas, there are there are economical impacts. There are many kind of end users, but there are also problems related to the quality of the waters. So essentially, we should not think only to physical parameters and to forecast the physical conditions of the sea, but also to think to other kind of operational systems that are related more to chemical and biological parameters and kind of ecosystems in some sense. So from this point of view, there is a lot of work to be done. And observing system is good for physical parameters, but completely to be invented for a biological component.
So if I can, two comments. First on Giovanni comments. But I think that is true that if you compare some results from weather services, for example, the analysis, and some observation, in most of the case, they have the same accuracy. So what is true that in the weather, in the atmosphere, the quality of the product is very, very high compared with the quality of the product that we have in the ocean. So the analysis of the atmosphere, they have the same accuracy, the same error of the satellite for the winds, for example. And they are even better because some areas are not covered from satellite, while are covered from the for the model. So I think that we should first reach that quality, and in order to tackle what Professor Burger was suggesting. And the second point, maybe I didn't explain well, but that was what we have in mind in our working group in the multidisciplinary and new instruments. So up to now we are observing 1% of the ocean in terms of physics or biology, sediment, and all these compartments that they interact, and we really don't know. We probably know more about the moon than the ocean. Yeah.
Yes, just comment because you referenced meteorology. I think one thing you have to take account of what is one of the base of the success of meteorology is the way the real-time data are exchanged. That is not only a technical problem, it is a problem of organization, of rules that are that are defined at a global level. So we have a global telecommunication system to exchange the data in real time. We have rules. We have manual code on how the data are to be coded in order that are captured, that assuring interoperability among the systems in the world. There is also an opportunity because WMO has launched a new program that is the WMO information system that is more open because global telecommunication system is very linked to operational program. Is based to the put forward of the information where they are needed. The WMO information system is more use an approach to search and push data where they are. And within this program, especially in Mediterranean, there is a proposal for a data collection production center with a common proposal from the Met Service and several Oceanographic Institute, Research Institute of Italy, and also with a cooperation with Croatia. So this is also an opportunity to exchange data in real time or as archive to manage, but we need to manage rules for metadata, how we describe data, how we code data, in which mechanisms are adopted to exchange, assuring interoperability among systems.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. There's been effort in the past also in the oceanographic community to go toward this direction. Stabilized format, protocol for exchange information, a lot of effort. But to my knowledge, up to now, it must be, in order to have it continuously running, it must be supported by research project. Once the research, I mean, we had research project creating the standard, creating the format, the protocol. Once the project finished, and then you start not every time from scratch, but so yeah, but I agree. And if I can, I also would. Yes, it's true that we should try to create this network to be sure that all the data that are collected are available to the community. I also think that it's true that with the technology that we have to now, probably due to our needs in the past, it's much more easier to observe the atmosphere than the ocean. And that. Okay. Any other? No? Giovanni, would you like to close the... It's up to me. So, thank you everybody, and I hope to see you in the aperitif at 7 after a little work in the city. Good wine, and thank you again for attending. It's been a very, I hope, fruitful meeting for sure for me. I think also that we tackled one of the bullet that was in all the working group reports: create physical meeting and create connection, even if we haven't done maybe for you deep science. I hope that some connection has been created between different organizations, different countries, and then you are back and you start collaborating. I'd like to, to thanks a lot the support we have in this amazing, I don't know what is the name. Yeah, thank you, and also the moderator that has been fantastic in driving the discussion all the day. Eleonora Romano, I think all of us must acknowledge Eleonora Romano. She still has to provide me the ticket for the flying back, so I don't know. Do we have it? So thanks also on my side. So thank you again, everybody. Yes, thank you to the technicians. I'm not the right one to thanks. I mean, I'm telling you. So I'm going to follow. So thanks, everybody. Thanks to you. Thanks for the streaming. I'm not to think about that, otherwise quite embarrassed. And thank you. Thank you to Giovanni, CMCC, for supporting the initiative. Thank you. Okay.